Hi everyone. As an analyst in cybersecurity, people ask me all the time, where do I learn? Who are the people that help me understand? And I've got in the studio today one of the people I've known for many years that I've learned so much from, and I think you're going to learn a lot from today. In our discussion, we're going to cover attack surface management and platform, might even get into AI a little bit. So I hope you stick around. I think you'll learn something. Hi, this is Ed Amoroso from Tag Infosphere. Nice to see you. I have my friend Gaurav Banga, who runs Balbix, here today. We're going to ask Gaurav to share some insights into definitely attack surface. That's an important topic, and I learn so much from him every time we cover it. And we'll get a little bit into some of the modern trends around threat and even how you use AI to do defense. So it's a pleasure to see you here today.
It's fantastic to meet you again, Ed.
It's so good to see you.
It's been a few months.
Yes, nice to see you. Hey, start maybe for people who want to learn a little bit about Balbix. Start with just a brief summary, and then we'll get into some tech. But tell us about the company.
So Balbix is an AI platform, AI native. You take in information from inside the enterprise, all your security tools, some of your IT tools, your business tools, and then you also take in information from the outside, different what's happening in the dark web, the threat feeds, what are vendors saying about their security issues. We combine the two together. We do some deduplication, some correlation, bring it all together, then do machine learning, AI on top of it to infer risk, and then also provide you with next best steps on how you might manage that risk down to acceptable levels.
And the focus is the attack surface, right, for the enterprise?
Focus
That's always been your focus.
Understanding your attack surface, figuring out what's important versus what's somewhat less important, what's more risky versus somewhat less risky, then being able to figure out different alternative approaches on what you might be able to do to manage risk down to acceptable levels.
So people watching who work in an enterprise, or maybe they're a CISO, and they're worried that I'm not entirely sure I've got my arms around the ways attackers can find their way in. That's your customer, right? That's where you guys really help them with that risk.
Typically, enterprise, large, extra large, extra large, if you will. The bigger they are, the more fun they are, or the more.
Well, there's more risk, right?
More risk there is, more different moving parts. And it's about helping our customer, the CISO or their teams, and even their CISO's bosses, like the people in charge for governance, helping them understand what's at stake, keeping track of all the things that nobody else has time to track. That is very expensive, using automation as much as possible, and then converting that information into actionability. That really is the key thing.
I would guess that just about everybody you deal with has 50, 60 tools, platforms, so on. Do you have to tangle into and sort of integrate with all of that? Maybe you replace some things? What's the typical sort of situation there?
So most people start with 3 to 5 tools. The 3 to 5 tools
That's 3 to 5 bigger tools, I would imagine.
Yeah, so 3 to 5,
SIM,
EDR, your vulnerability management tool, your CMDB. They have partial coverage, they have partial information, and when you put 2 and 2 and 3 together, that's when you start getting sense of the overall picture. Remember, we are also combining this with a lot of information from the outside, which you don't have to worry about. And then you slowly add tools. Some of our largest customers, for someone who we both know very well, right. They have Telcom. 97 tools integrated into Balbix.
Yeah. That's why I said the bigger number. I know it can get a little out of control. Now, you and I, we've worked together a long time. I think it's not unreasonable to say that the threat now, if your attack surface is weak, is way higher than it used to be. Is that mostly nation state? Is it criminal? Like, why is it so much higher? Or is it tech? Is it just that the automation has gotten better? Maybe it's all of those. I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably all of them, but I think the defining thing is tech or speed, automation. It used to take weeks, sometimes months, for anybody to weaponize a new piece of information, like there's a vulnerability, there's a way to get around things, or there's a new way that makes it easier for the attacker. It would take weeks and months for them to weaponize it. And that typically was good enough time or enough time for the defenders to do something about it. Now, some defenders were way behind for historical reasons or some other reasons, not enough focus. But if you were a well-run company, you would have weeks, sometimes months, to defend yourself after you have that information. That's not true anymore. So if you look at some of the latest research coming out, some CISA Kev vulnerabilities can be exploited in as little as 5 days. Now imagine you have to patch or otherwise mitigate, let's say, 10,000 assets or 5,000 assets within 4 days. That's hard. And this automation thing is kicking in, and it is forcing us, making it more and more difficult to keep up.
You know, I called you a couple of months ago and said, you have to help me understand how you're using AI to deal with the attack surface. And you told me about this ensemble concept that I thought was really cool. Tell us a little bit about how that works, how you're using these AI models to improve the results. And I think visibility is one of the things that I notice gets much better when you do this. But how does that work?
So let's break up the problem of security in general into three pieces. First is getting in the data and gaining visibility.
Ingesting data, right.
And then the second thing is analyzing it for risk. And the third thing is acting upon it, actioning it.
Got it.
And all of them are hard problems, right? Because if you think about 97 tools or even 5 tools, putting that data together, there's in different formats, overlapping, incomplete, somewhat inaccurate. Everybody has an inaccurate CMDB that we all left at home, right? So one of the nicest things, one of the best things that has happened in the last few years has been the invention of large language models. Large language models allow us to unify this data just in the way that a human being would, because they understand language, and not just one language, the language of MAC addresses, the language of IP addresses, the language of ports, the language of other kind of signatures, the language of what software is installed on a Windows machine versus what software is installed on a Linux machine. So these are all languages that large language models are particularly good at. Now, the ensemble, it's kind of necessary because there's not a single large language model. There's not a single language. You kind of need a collection, an ensemble of models that have been trained independently to try to make sense of what kind of attack surface you have. Right? And this, what we have found is this is not very dissimilar from how human beings perceive the world around them and get visibility. So there's a part of your brain which is trained on, for example, the shapes and colors and things like that. There's another part of your brain that is trained on words in English. There's another part of your brain that is trained on words in French. And there's another part of your brain, and they kind of correlated too. There's another part of your brain that is trained on history. There's another part of your brain that might be trained on the smells of a jungle versus the smells of a city. And what you perceive is basically, essentially it is a collection of all these perceptions working together. So the same technique can be used by having a series of large language models and other types of AI, like decision trees and Bayesian models, working together, looking at different aspects of the attack surface is giving you some overall perception.
I loved when you explained it, because I'd spent a lot of time with the way neural networks work, and they work in that manner, but it's more within the confines of an existing model, of one model. When you told me, and you used the example of like you're trained in different things, a human brain, and I went, that's a pretty good idea, because you're raising the level of abstraction a little bit and allowing different models that have different focus areas or different strengths to sort of collectively help you determine visibility, which is really what attack surface management is. It's a very clever way to think about multiple models. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, one additional thing that human brains are capable of, which we are beginning to leverage AI for, is the notion of depth. And this is what makes AI a little bit further along, a little bit smarter. Not as smart as humans, but smarter. And what that depth means is that first off, you need to understand some lower level attributes of your attack surface. For example, what software is installed and what ports are open and what kind of assets these have. Is it a Windows server versus basic stuff, right? On top of that, you can build in the second level of understanding, which would be something like, what applications is this involved with? What users interact with it? How much privilege they have? What kind of information goes in? And then you get to another level, which is say, is this aspect being attacked? Is that people using these attack vectors or not? And if they do, then what do they do with it? And what kind of... So this is very similar to how the human brain also works, right? First you learn alphabet, and then you learn arithmetic, and then you learn algebra and economics and history and geography. And if you, for example, can't do English, you probably can't, or some natural language, you can't do economics, right? But the fact that you can do English doesn't mean you can do economics. These are organized in a hierarchy. Similarly, you can create a hierarchy like that for an AI brain, which is an ensemble that has a little bit more depth than just using a single model.
It's a very clever way to go. Now, was this easy to integrate into the platform? Did this require much work, or were you already working along those lines?
Yeah, so we were not quite working. I mean, in the early days, there were no LLMs. So we were part of the whole evolution of AI to the point where right now it's kind of like easy. We can just invoke an LLM and all that. Before, I remember predecessor to LLMs is transformer models, and before that we had tensor to tensor deep learning and sequence to sequence deep learning, and then plain old CNN and then RNN. So my company kind of grew up with all of those evolutions, and with each evolution of AI, it was quite better. I think the single most important realization when we realized there was not a single model, we needed an ensemble. And I think that put us well on our way to being useful.
With your customers today, what are some of the key trends and issues? Is it, are they dealing with continued sprawl? Are they dealing with the use of AI? Are they dealing with sort of continued work from home? What are some key trends that affect this attack surface and maybe drive new requirements?
I mean, the number one trend really is two things. One of them is the use of automation and AI by the attackers. And then the second one is the use of AI by the insiders. And those two really are what threaten or what are beginning to take the attack surface.
AI is the root of all evil.
AI is the root of all evil. AI is also probably going to be the foundation to our being able to fight the evil.
It's both, right? It's both. Offense, defense,
right. Yeah. And I kind of think of it this way: as when anything new is invented, like the computer, it can be used for any purpose.
That's right.
The mobile phone, it can be used for any purpose. The thing is that once something as powerful as this has been invented, you cannot afford to sit back and rely on your traditional tools. Then we'd have horses racing cars run by the bad guys and horses by the good guys, and that's not going to go very well.
That's so interesting. Let's talk about deployment of your platform. People watching say, this is something I want to try this. What do? They call you up, they typically do a POC or something? What's the experience like?
So the most important thing you want to find out is what outcomes are you looking for. And everybody has slightly different outcomes they're looking for. Their goals are somewhat different. Priority-wise, we want to really understand that. So when you ask us to help, or ask for help, or you reach out, that's the first thing we'll investigate. We'll build a blueprint for what your solution might look like. We'll bring in experts, like sometimes Ed, to help us understand, but we have some partners who are fantastic. We bring them in and they can help if necessary, and if you don't need them, that's fine. And then we do a proof of value, where we essentially build out a blueprint in your environment. The proof of value itself is pretty quick. It takes about a week for the brain, maybe 5 days for a smaller company, for the brain to learn your environment, because it essentially does what multiple of your current capabilities are. It straddles attack surface management, vulnerability prioritization, risk calculations, risk quantification, and then also how you communicate internally, which is the most important thing, how you dispatch work, how do you verify that the right amount of remediation efforts have been done. So all of that is learned in about, I'd say, 5 to 7 days. And then we work with your teams. In about 2 weeks, you kind of you never shut down. The first time you see Balbix, it's like if you have ever seen a CT scan of your body for the first time and you felt, wow, right? That's how it feels. Now, CT scans become boring very quickly, particularly if you're sick. You want to see results. So the next most important thing that you will see, which is perhaps the most awesome thing that you've seen, And when your teams work in conjunction with the platform, you start seeing your risk burning down. Everything feels better, and it becomes better. Your time to respond to the issues becomes less and less. You can actually fix your new threats, your riskiest vulnerabilities in 2 days, 3 days, 4 days.
I mean, that's the whole return on investment, right? You invest in the platform. When that visibility leads to removal of vulnerabilities, that reduces incidents, and incidents cost you money. I know you and I have talked about this so much. It's kind of getting over that inertia of not wanting to spend on a platform, but when you do, you save money. Your budget on a year-over-year basis actually goes down.
I mean, it's true, right? Everybody should be thinking about, yes, you have to run your business, and sometimes the business takes over, and usually in the world of cyber, it does take over. But if you don't invest enough in changing the business, then you get further and further behind. So with today in 2024, or even last year in 2023, we are at a crossroads. The bad guys have a new tool. We also have it, AI, right? And we're going to have to change the business. Because if you keep doing things the old way, if 100% of our investments go in the old way, and I'm not just talking about tools investment, it's like the most important thing is mind share, right? I mean, if you are not spending enough time thinking about how I would run my security operations, my security platform, the architecture differently, then you're going to get further and further behind. And it's going to be harder and harder to catch up.
Is the website the right place for people to be in touch with you?
Balbix.com homepage, and there's the Balbix.com AI page. Both of them, we try not to be in the face with AI like some of the other companies are trying to do, but the value prop, how you get started, all of that is there.
I've seen the POVs and I've seen the platform. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys must be busy, huh?
We are very busy.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I love seeing the progress you're making. Keep doing what you're doing. We need you to keep everyone nice and safe.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you again.
We'll try to do a bit.
Oh, please do. Come back in a little bit and share more. Great. And for the rest of you watching, we'll see you next time.